Let the record reflect that 4 of the 5 of us are currently here, although Commissioner Mergen is having some technology problems and will be with us hopefully very soon by phone. Randy, I'm guessing we could just acknowledge, you can acknowledge that in a minute.
Yes. Yep.
Okay, great. Let's go ahead and join together in the Pledge of Allegiance, especially as we just commemorated Memorial Day and thinking about those who have given their lives for the freedoms, the liberties, the justice we all enjoy. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And hope you all had a good weekend. Okay, our first item is to approve the agenda. I know, you're laughing, Lee. Is there a motion to approve the agenda? Lee, I cannot hear you. There you go.
I'll move it. I'll move the agenda.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Lensmeyer. Is there a second?
Persky, second.
Great, thanks. Seeing no other changes. Andy, why don't we go ahead and do the roll?
Okay. District 1.
Aye.
District 2.
Aye.
District 3. Jeff is still not on. District 4.
Aye.
District 5.
Aye.
Passes.
Thank you. Is there anybody that's waiting to do the public access forum?
There is not.
Okay, just want to remind people, we value your thoughts. If you've got something that's not on an agenda for any particular day, let us know. Either come on, you can call in, you can email us. We just want to make sure that you know that we are interested in you here. All right, public consent agenda. Does anybody have any items that they want to have pulled for further discussion? I know there's one, number 11. It's the one license that neither our sheriff or county attorney signed. And I think if we could just put that, if you're okay with it, when Janelle is on, because perhaps Commissioner Mergen will be with us, we can at least hear some comments from them. Is there any other items that anybody wants pulled?
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I'll go ahead and without any changes, I'll go ahead and I'll move those items except for number 11. And then I will say on item number 6, I think it's a malt liquor. I think the original request says 2-3 malt liquor, but I think it should be 3-2. So just so the people get their fair share. So
excellent, especially because like that would be non-existent. So we'll make sure the record reflects that the consent agenda, and by voting on these, that we are approving 3-2.
Okay, that's page 31. Okay.
Okay, thank you for catching that. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Commissioner Lensmeyer. All right, seeing no other discussion, let's go ahead and take the roll.
District 2.
Aye.
District 3. Jeff is still not on. District 4.
Aye.
District 5.
Aye.
District 1.
Aye.
Passes.
Thank you. Okay, we will move to the Human Services Board consent items. So we're going to be recessing from our regular meeting to come together as the Human Services Board. And I see Ms. Huberty is coming on.
Good morning,
Welcome.
Madam Chair, Commissioners. Melissa Huberty, I'm the Human Services Administrator, and I have a short consent agenda today. There are items D1 through D3 on pages 361 through 364, and I'm available for questions should you have any.
Do members have any questions? Seeing none, a motion to accept the consent agenda would be in order.
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Lensmeyer. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Notch. Seeing no further discussion, Randy, if you'd be willing to take the roll, that'd be great.
Okay, District 3 is Jeff, and I don't hear him yet. District 4,
Aye.
District 5. Aye. District 1,
Aye.
District 2,
Aye.
that passes also.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. And it sounds like Commissioner Mergen will be dialing in hopefully very soon. We're going to move now, we're reconvening back to our regular county board meeting. And our next agenda item is a presentation by Janelle Kendall. This is approving the transfer of ownership of facility dog Nova to Stearns County. And then after that, we can we can get some information from the sheriff and from her. Welcome. Can you hear us, Janelle?
There we go. Yes.
There we go. Yay. Thank you.
Good morning, Chairperson Clark and County Board. This is Nova. My name is Janelle Kendall. I'm the Stearns County Attorney, and I'm here with our facility dog Nova and her handler, Kelly Troutman. We set down the path to get a facility dog for the County Attorney's Office, actually all the way back in 2014. It is very much a process, not an event. Helping Paws Incorporated out of the metro area of Minnesota started training dogs for individual use. Most of their dogs are actually placed with individual persons, some with veterans, with people with a variety of conditions in which a dog can help them with the daily events of their life. Facility dogs have been common in other areas of the United States for quite a few years. When I was on the board of the National District Attorneys Association, I was one of the few elected prosecutors that did not have a facility dog in my office. So we set down the path to get Nova. She was paired with Kelly in October of 2019. And by paired, we mean the dog is specifically placed in a location to match that dog's skill set. Nova has a number of skills, including opening drawers and turning lights on and off, just a number of what would be caretaker dog roles. But she is especially suited to be calm and collected and present for victims and witnesses who interact with the county attorney's office. So far, we have met with, Kelly's figure, about 20 victims and witnesses in homicide cases and domestic violence cases, but especially in child abuse cases, in situations where children are asked to testify or come in and just talk to our office about the bad things that have happened in their lives. So we have not yet taken Nova into court when there is active court going on. There'll be a process of litigation that will happen to ensure that it remains a fair court hearing and that there's not undue sympathy for persons who are accompanied by a dog. But this does happen in many, many states around the country. It just hasn't been done yet in Minnesota. The only other facility dog in a county attorney's office is Nova's sister. She is in the Ramsey County Attorney's Office, but they are strictly keeping her within their office. And we are planning to not only use Nova in our office, but she'll also be out and around in the community. So it's been a process of doing this. We want to make sure that we thank Terry Sin from Helping Paws Incorporated. She was Nova's original trainer, and Mary Ann Mahold here locally. We were talking together at a social event, and she told me that she was aware that we wanted a facility dog for our office and that there was now a group in Minnesota that was beginning to train these. And Sue Kluwer came up from Helping Paws and made sure that our office was suitable for Nova. She actually visited Kelly at her home because obviously Nova lives with Kelly every single day, but does come into work now on a regular basis. And she has been meeting with victims and witnesses throughout the pandemic. People obviously have a choice if they want to have a dog sit in on their meeting with our office, but due to the traumatic nature of much of what we handle, we found that she's been a real help. And Kelly, if you could talk a little bit about the certification that you received last week.
So I took a public access test. So I just needed to demonstrate that I have control over Nova in a public setting. We passed flying colors. Nova is, I mean, as you can see, she's a good girl. She's empathetic. She just is intuitive and she knows when she's needed. So we just demonstrated that she still has all of her skills that she learned and more at our test last weekend.
So our request today of the board is to approve transfer of ownership of facility dog Nova to Stearns County. As the commissioners are aware, people can't donate things to the county without your knowledge and acceptance. And she has between $40,000 and $50,000 worth of training. So this is a valuable asset to the county, but also just a welcome addition to our staff in the county attorney's office.
Yes, we're very excited about this, and Kelly, welcome as well. Members, questions, comments?
Can Nova play a musical instrument?
Not that I'm aware of. Sometimes she burps. We got that out of her before the board meeting. We haven't heard her sing so far.
Well, and I really appreciate your talking about the challenges and the trauma that people, sometimes are experiencing, the difference that Nova will be able to make. And yes, if you can help her figure out how to do a xylophone or drums or something, maybe she'll make an onstage appearance at some point. Maybe it's Summertime by George.
That could happen.
Yeah, that'd be very cool. Be cool to be talking about. Yes, we're just very, very glad. And as you all heard, we need a motion to be accepting the donation of Nova.
So move.
Thank you, Lee. Is there a second?
Persky, second.
Great. Thank you, Joe. All right. Any other comments? Don't think so. And I know you're going to be making sure. I'm sorry.
This is Jeff Merman.
Oh, great. Hello, Jeff.
Good morning. How far are we?
We are actually at the first non-consent thing that we would be voting on. So we are voting on approving the transfer of ownership of Nova to Stearns County. And hopefully you got to hear County Attorney Kendall and Kelly talk a little bit about Nova in the process.
I did not, but I just got on. So first thing I heard was you talking here.
Okay. Well, we're very glad that you're here, and the record will reflect that you've joined us. And technology just stinks sometimes. Okay. Hopefully you got a chance to look at the board packet on this. Do you have any questions for either of them? Otherwise, we're ready to take the roll.
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, thank you.
Who was the second on that, Terrell?
It was Commissioner Persky.
Okay. Lee, how do you vote?
Aye.
District 5.
Aye.
District 1.
Aye.
District 2.
Aye.
District 3, Jeff.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Great. Well, thank you. Look forward to getting to meet Nova.
Thank you. We will bring her down after the meeting. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. And members, now we have the one item on our consent agenda. One of the liquor licenses. It doesn't happen very often, but because neither our sheriff or county attorneys signed the license, it made sense to go ahead and just hear from them, their reasoning. So Janelle, and I think Steve was going to be able to come on too, or I think he's on the line. If you two wouldn't mind just letting us know.
As you know, the Shady's liquor license, they actually own 6 different locations, and only one of Shady's locations is in county jurisdiction. That's the one near Cold Spring on the golf course. They are in pending litigation against the state of Minnesota regarding following the governor's orders way back to the pandemic reopening last spring. That is still in litigation. So since the liquor license holder is still in active litigation regarding following the law, we felt it appropriate to point that out to the board. It's up to you if you want to grant the license, and we understand the board probably will grant the license. But when we have a license holder who is in active litigation, that the rules should not be applied to them. We obviously have many, many other liquor license holders in Stearns County who have followed these rules and have not announced that they're not going to. So it's just as simple as that. It's pending litigation. The next hearings on that are scheduled in July, and the county is not a part of that litigation in any way. That's between the liquor license holder and the state. But it's just a fact that that's the way that it stands. So we pass it to you for your discretion. But I believe that sheriff is online as well.
Good morning, Commissioners. Yes, I would just probably echo the thoughts of Janelle. I didn't feel comfortable maybe signing that when there's some pending litigation, just because I don't know where the state's going to take it or what the end result would be. But obviously it's before you guys as a board. During COVID, we did take some complaints there about some non-mask wearing, but I can tell you that every time we arrived, everybody had masks on, so I don't know if those were bona fide complaints. And I'm not aware of any recent or anything in the last year as far as liquor violations at that actual location. However, they also weren't open for a while, I guess, because of COVID. So my main concern would be just the fact that there's some pending litigation, and I'm not sure where that puts the county in the middle of all that. It's not the county that's doing the litigation, it's the Attorney General's office, and I don't know what the end result would be. So I just didn't feel comfortable in signing off on that particular liquor license at this time.
Commissioner Lenzmeyer.
Would this be a possibility that we would approve the liquor license at this point, but reconsider it once we have the outcome of the litigation? I've never heard of that, but is that a possibility?
Good question. Thoughts on that? I was almost wondering the opposite, but I like that idea, Commissioner Lenzmeyer.
Or would the outcome of that, if it's affects them, negate the license anyway?
Potentially. I mean, one question that I've had is how to make sure that our granting of this is not related to any actions under which there's litigation. Because we don't want this to be affecting the litigation one way or the other.
We do, send this to the state, and it is actually a state license. They're granting a year license for them. If later you decide to pull it based on litigation, I'm not sure what happens then.
So I guess, wait, just really quick. So I'm hearing two questions so far, and Joe, then I think you have another question. One is, can we grant it and then change it depending upon the litigation? Or would the litigation potentially, trump any action that we would be making? And I don't know. And Joe, do you have an additional one off of that one? Because, well, we got, yeah, okay, wait, let's go ahead, Janelle. And then we'll go to Joe.
As Randy points out, the state holds the license, and there may well be some consequences to their liquor license that would be imposed by the state. So there's no specific legal reason not to grant the license right now. It's just the fact that that's out there and something may happen with that. But the state does have the authority to impose things on their liquor license in addition or above and beyond anything that the county board might do.
And to Lee's question, I guess I'm just kind of curious, are we able, after granting something, to change that? I don't know that we're going to go there, but I think that's part of your question. And maybe we don't need to based on that other information. Because I'm guessing you want to think about that, frankly. Right. So Joe, what was your question or comment?
Yes, that was my question, was whether the state would override our decision. So it's kind of up in the air. And just a question to Janelle, have we seen this in the past at all, to your knowledge? Or Lee, have you seen it? Mike, have you seen this?
This is the first time we've seen it. We saw it in Stearns County. They were one of the first ones that the Attorney General's office took action on, but they weren't the only ones. There's somewhere between 15 and 20 of these pending around the state. Some of them have already settled and fines have been imposed and suspension times have been imposed and they've moved on. Others are still pending. This is one of those that is still pending.
Okay. All right. So recognizing what we decide today is not a reflection on this litigation, is there a motion?
I'll move it.
I'll move to grant their, or I'll second to grant their license.
Okay, so Commissioner Lenzmeyer moves and Commissioner Mergen seconds granting the liquor license. Randy, would you take the roll?
Sure. District 5,
Aye.
District 1,
Aye.
District 2,
Aye.
District 3,
Aye.
District 4.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Thank you both. I think as two people who are both your service is valued and who are elected officials, it's important if you're choosing, if you're saying, I'm not signing this, that we at least have some understanding of it. So really appreciate you being willing to walk us through that. Thank you. All right, members, our next item is conducting a public hearing and consider enacting ordinance number 624. As I think we all remember, we've been doing a fair amount of work on balancing the interests of different property owners and trying to also give some flexibility while recognizing the state and the DNR have some specific requirements and places we can't go. And so what's in front of us today is our most recent version of that for our consideration. Angie, welcome. Both to you, Ms. Benson and Ms. Berg. And Shelley, you might have had something you wanted to say first. Sorry about that.
Madam Chair, Shelley Benson, Environmental Services Director. I think the most important thing is that we did hear from the Ordinance Review Committee twice on this in the past. We did hold a public hearing previously and then continued for further action to hear more and make some, look to make some modifications. Angie is here to go through those modifications in the discussion. So I will turn it over to Angie, and we are on packet page 367.
Good morning, Commissioners. Angie Berg, Environmental Services. And we do have a member of the public who needs to be off by 10 a.m. So I'm going to be a bit brief in the presentation so we allow Mr. Nystrom some time to talk. As Shelley indicated, this has been in front of you before. The last time was in February. As Commissioner Clark stated, we're here to partially adopt our Lakeshore Living Policy, which states that the board is charged with creating riparian standards that balance the interests of both year-round and seasonal residents while protecting the natural resources that draw them to the lakeshore amenities. By way of background, again, we've had lots of discussion on this in addition to at the Ordinance Review Committee. So in December, we had an Ordinance Review Committee discussion on this. In February, this board had a public hearing, which was continued. And in April, the Ordinance Review Committee met again to dialogue on the public hearing comments from February and give a recommendation to the board for your meeting today. Quickly, by way of background and for others that are listening, the county is required to regulate shoreline development, including density and RVs. The current ordinance is more restrictive than the proposed ordinance. Enforcement did occur on this issue until 2008 when it did pause for conversation on the comprehensive plan. And lastly, nonconformities cannot be grandfathered in. So what I'm not going to go through is the opinion survey that was done. We went through this the last time. This was also part of the board packet, but you'll see that there's a number of different questions that we asked last year to the public. This did go out to all residents who live on a lake or a river. And today, the recommendations that we would have for the board for your meeting today is to hold a public hearing, change the enforcement mechanism from criminal to civil, which would be going back to what we had prior to 2018, delay enforcement until 2022, accept DNR's approval. As Commissioner Clark indicated, that we're bound by the DNR's approval of this process. And then lastly, adopt the ordinance on this issue to allow property owners that do want to comply to allow them to apply for provisional use. I would add that these 5 recommendations were adopted by the Ordinance Review Committee last month, and that is what is in front of you today. So with that, Madam Chair, we have 5 speakers today. I'd like to start, if we could please, with Derek Nystrom in the interest of his time.
That sounds very good. Mr. Nystrom, welcome.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Reading through this, I appreciate the changes that you have made. I'm still struggling with the fact that you need anything like this. I mean, there's already setbacks, guidelines, and everything by the DNR. You know, the amount of restrictions that are being set forth, I don't feel like a property owner anymore. I feel like we get to use our property and pay to use it and told how to use our property. It's rather sad coming off of Memorial Weekend when people have died for this country to be at this point. I don't know where it ever ends. I mean, there's landowners that have homes on them that look trashed. And I drive around and look at that versus even around the lakes. Most of the properties on our lake have improved with the people who have campers on them. And anyway, it's rather unfortunate. I think what we really have going on here is basically a class warfare. Those that have money battling with those that do not at this point. The ones that do not usually lose anyway. So financially, it's rather unfortunate. I look at the people who are able to utilize a lake lot with a camper. It's usually because either one, in our case, we're in a floodplain, or number 2, it's due to the inability to be able to afford a year-round home, which is what a lot of people seem to want to see on lakes these days, so that the tax base gets a little bit higher and things look better. So that's basically my 2 cents worth at this point. I still struggle with the freedoms that we lose every single day, and I don't know where it ends. Thank you.
Very much appreciate it, Mr. Nystrom. Thank you for making the time, and we know that you had to wait a while, so thank you. Ms. Berg is next.
Yes, Madam Chair, I believe Bob Guggenberger is on the line. He would be next, and then after Bob would be Mike Rosicki.
Okay, great. And Mr. Guggenberger, while you're coming on, part of what I didn't say, although Ms. Berg did, is to remind people this is less restrictive than the current ordinance, and it is believed that the DNR will not let us go further than this. And an attempt at balancing, knowing that this is just a hard topic. Okay, Mr. Guggenberger, welcome.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. First of all, I don't think anyone here is against recreational use of our lakes. I mean, that's what they're there for. And that's not what this change is about. But it is about protecting our lakes for future generations, and that's everyone's responsibility. And there are environmental issues here regarding septic systems and land use. And there are also property rights and property value issues involved. You know, there's an adage about a man's home is his castle. And people who have chosen to live on the lake year round are just as much entitled to those, you know, those rights of tranquility, peace and tranquility as anyone else that lives in a city. And, you know, and interestingly, the people that I've talked to that have been either against this ordinance or neutral on it, none of them would allow this to happen, to have this development next door to them. In other words, it's not in my backyard. So I know a lot of the testimony you've received has been against this change, but I support it because I feel that there has to be limits. In order for everyone to enjoy the lakes and protect the lakes, there has to be limits. What in effect has happened over the years has been the creation of mini campgrounds. And we all know that all the controversy that surrounds campgrounds and all the rules and regulations that go along with them. And here we've got many campgrounds with no rules and regulations, and that can't be. It's not going to work.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for making the time today. And again, I will say this to each of you. Thank you for being patient as we were trying to work out some technology issues. Appreciate that as well. So up next is Mr. Rozicki. And then next would be Ms. Nystrom. Is that correct, Angie? I'm looking at your list. Okay, great. Okay, welcome.
Yeah, this is Mike Krzyzewski. I have the volume. I don't have the ability to see anybody. But with that, Madam Chair, Commissioners, good morning. My name is Mike Krzyzewski. My wife and I reside at 19116 Edgeview Road, Richmond. We're on Cedar Island Lake on the Horseshoe Chain. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you concerning this proposed amendment pertaining the use of RVs on shorelands throughout the county. I have to say, as a precursor, though, I still think being able to hold these kinds of meetings and public hearings in person is just a much better process. And hopefully with the changes in COVID and CDC, we're going to get to that point in the near future. I provided you with comments in a 426 letter and again in a 520 email to Angie. I'm not going to repeat those comments. I'm going to try to summarize quickly. So I appreciate the commissioners essentially keeping the land use ordinance provisions in place for permanent RV vehicles on lots and parcels. I think that makes a lot of sense and is consistent with your 2040 comp plan in a lot of ways. I also acknowledge that the matter of temporary use of RVs is a lot more difficult, and it's a thorny issue, as we can testify by the public comments you've heard and received. Though when you did the survey, an awful lot of people were concerned with adding the number of RVs on individual lots. A couple practical comments, I think. Provisional use, I would strongly encourage the commissioners to require that the person that's going to add up to 4 RVs on their property provide some sort of notice to the neighbors, potentially including a copy of the site plan that they have to submit to the county. I think this is part of a good neighbor policy and would let people know what's occurring. And I think in the long run, it might lessen conflicts. I know you can leave it to and expect and hope that neighbors will be good neighbors and talk to people beforehand, but I think since there is a provisional use procedure, I think notice to the neighbors so they know what's going on up front would be very helpful. I'll also say, similar to the previous speaker, it's pretty clear that adding up to 4 RVs on individual lots can't help but increase alteration to shorelands, impacts to riparian areas, and to our lakes. So with that, I have questions that I put forth in my previous letter and email that I didn't really see a clear response to. Are there specific provisions that are enforceable that prohibit altering shorelands in order to place RVs on these properties, and including removing riparian vegetation or increasing the amount of impervious surface on the lot to grade a site for RVs or take other actions to make a level pad for RVs? I also wonder, as far as enforcement, you've gone back and forth on this, and I understand it may be difficult, but it would seem to me as a practical matter is that if there's a conflict with the RVs and the owner is not complying with the requirements, if there is a bona fide complaint, it would seem appropriate that the county could, with cause, revoke the provisional use, and that would take care of things short of going through a civil court process. I get it, and it makes sense, and I think you've made a valiant effort on one hand, because there are a lot of families, even in our area, where they come up for weekends and such, and it's a reasonable thing, but it doesn't seem that there's a demonstrated need to include the number of RVs that are really allowed to reside on our lakes all summer long, essentially as additional housing. The other thing I would say, you talked about the DNR review and requirements. There's a language in the amendment that talks about complying with setbacks and then refers folks to another section of the ordinance. I suggest in the actual provision for this type of use, you state the setback for RVs as 100 feet rather than referring to another section, because most folks aren't going to take the time to go to the other section and look it up. So those are my comments. I want to make one quick comment on a related matter. I included a May 21st email to Angie concerning the RV parks and dock. I know your review committee talked about it briefly at a meeting that was not open to the public and basically dismissed the idea of amending the land use ordinance concerning mooring spaces to stay with what's in there and what was done in 2007. There is a DNR model ordinance, and I again strongly encourage the county to take this up and consider a public hearing to have the mooring spaces reflect this, the model ordinance, the DNR. I'm going to close here and say, we look at the Cozy Corner as an example, and at the end of the day with the resort and the expansion, there's 210 boat slips. One of the staff members, Jennifer, provided me information about density and related stuff, which I appreciate. And it shows that the adjoining property that Mr. Myers owned, that either he or someone he sells to could develop up to 245 RVs. And under your current ordinance, you could then have 245 more mooring spaces, coming up to a grand total of a dock system, extensive dock system with 455 boat slips or mooring sites on the shoreland, which clearly is overkill and not in sync with the goals and policies for lakeshore living or in your 2040 comp plan. So I urge you to reconsider the idea of getting public input, talking to the DNR, and that issue about docks was not part of the survey. And I think if you did a survey, you'd find there's much concern with lakeshore owners concerning extensive dock systems and not following the DNR model ordinance in that regard. Thank you.
Mike, thank you. And I must say, I always appreciate your trying to come up with more solutions. And that second part, I hope staff was paying attention to. It's not part of this public hearing, but I understand why you brought it up. Remember, we do have our open forum at the beginning of every meeting. So if there's something additional you want to put on that, members, we need to focus on this particular ordinance in front of you. You probably figured out I share some of your concerns on that, Mike. But I just want to make sure we have to stay focused on this, just like in our other ones, we have to stay focused.
I would have come to the public forum at the beginning if or when I have an opportunity to appear in person. You know,
Yep, and I'm going to stop you on that. Wait, Mike, I'm going to stop you on that. Yep. We very much appreciate that, but we're going to keep moving on today. And I think we'll be back soon in person, but we have lots of opportunities for people to give input, and you have been fabulous throughout this whole thing about trying to stay focused and help us through it. So I hope you're hearing appreciation as we continue just to be focused on this particular issue right now.
Thank you.
So thank you.
One last thing.
Only if it's on this.
Yep, it's on the it's
Okay.
on the
All right,
RV
go ahead.
ordinance, not on my
Good.
new
Thank
favorite
you.
topic.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I did point out that there are places in the existing land use ordinance that if you're going to allow a provisional use for up to 4, that's in conflict with the definition of RVs and the conflict with the definition of campgrounds. And I think there needs to be some clarification. Angie had suggested some language. I didn't see a final copy. She didn't mention it in her presentation today. But definitions, like any contract, are really important to interpret and know the meaning and how things work and not have conflicts because it creates confusion. Thank you.
Yes, appreciate that. And when we get back to before members have questions or comments, we'll make sure that she is able to address that. Thank you very much. Appreciate your looking for ways to make sure things are clear and easy to understand for people.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Berg, is it Ms. Nystrom next?
Correct.
And then Mr. Keen. Okay, Julie, welcome.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, proceed.
Awesome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. First of all, thanks for the time today. I know that this has just been hashed over. So I will try to be brief, but appreciate the time. As I've been looking through the documents and the information, and Angie, thank you for putting up with my many questions. I appreciate it. I really truly want to help understand, because I understand the balance between a property owner as myself and also someone who might live next to a property owner, which could also be myself, and so trying to really understand everything involved. And I know that with the DNR recommendation, they said to go ahead and use the shoreland standards as our gauge for moving forward with like RVs and definitions and things like that. And so when you go to the shoreland standards, looking in some of the zoning provisions, they use terms like the single and the duplex and the triplex, which I assume is like the housing, like you have a single house, a duplex house, a triplex sort of thing. But what I didn't see, yes, thank you. What I didn't see was the in the actual code, because I went and I tried to look at that, was where they really say RVs. And I know that the DNR says to, use it as a guide, but is it a little different? And I know that other counties, based upon you guys' research and display to us, show that other counties went with that assumption. And there must be something more that I'm not seeing or understanding that would lead other people to go down that road too, because I think that RVs are a little different and they do take up less square footage, or they can, granted you can have a very small house. But I think taking a look at that, if there's an opportunity to look at the total square footage that can be really used on the lot for the impervious surface, because it's about 25%, and looking at how RVs can fit into that and do it without harming the environment, because I don't really think that anyone intends to harm the environment. And I know there are unintended consequences to such things as well, where we think we're not, and maybe we are. But I just wonder, is everybody assuming that those words mean single, like one RV, one, smaller thing, or is there really an opportunity to kind of take a look and say, hey, DNR, maybe this needs to be looked at too. So that was one of my points on that, which I think, I know that the organizations need to live in harmony as well, but it affects a larger group of people. And so I would love on a, if I could get an email or something to kind of tell me like where that information lies with how they really categorize RVs and where that's written, because I was really looking hard for it and I didn't find it. So I think that would be good. And I think something for everyone to think about, because I think it would open up a little bit more permanent RVs for lots to find a better balance, possibly up to that 4, which is the RV campground.
Thank you. Go ahead.
No, and so also too, I just, the whole thing about building on land and that sort of thing. Well, not all land is really conducive to building on it. And maybe you can get a structure up but then have to continue to watch foundations and do expensive foundation repair work on structures in certain lands. And I think that sometimes by having the RV, at least you allow people to have access to the lot where it may not be feasible to be able to build a permanent structure because of maybe your financial situation or, the ongoing costs that could be associated with some parcels. Some parcels don't have that issue. I understand that. Topic 3, I don't really know if creating a little bit more generous RV allotment is really feasible based upon what I saw being written in the DNR codes. But again, if you take it on square footage, it may be better. I apologize. My allergies are kind of kicking me. What have we ever considered looking at maybe a holiday break? There are sales tax holidays in different counties across the United States. What about taking the major holidays, Memorial, 4th of July, Labor Day, and having kind of a RV holiday, but then again, only allowing up to that campground limit of possibly 4 per lot. Now, I know that lots are all different sizes and there's a lot of different things there, but it may be a consideration to take a look at to kind of find a balance, because families get together on those holidays. And I think that's really my concern about that is, not allowing that to take place. And will a variance even be possible for lands like this? Because we have the provisional use things, and I know anybody can apply for a variance, but you can apply for a variance with no chance of ever getting a variance, and so will there really be an opportunity if someone should want to apply for a variance, which would allow the neighbors to be notified of any actions, which is, part of what we're talking about here is communication with our neighbors and being good neighbors to each other. But will there really be a way for someone to actually achieve that and get one? And so that's a little struggle. And then what would be some of the conditions to get the variance? And, does this really affect parcels as we move forward that are currently empty that would be sold, where people would want to put campers on it? I know at least a couple around the county where people had wanted to purchase it. They paid high dollar for it and they wanted to put campers on it, and then found out about these ordinances. And I know one can come back and say, well, it's your job as the person buying the property to understand all of the requirements around that parcel as well. But what do we do to some of the land values? And as far as a taxpayer with an empty lot, then I would potentially be able to sell it for less. So should taxes on those lots be decreased as well? So those were some of the things that I just wanted to make sure and bring up and share. I know based upon everybody and everything that this is a really delicate topic, but it is for everybody. And it's obviously near and dear to our heart because of our families there. And, I have to tell my kids, well, sorry, we can't bring a pop-up out so you can have a sleepover with your friends or your birthday party. The places just don't allow enough space for that for kids. And that to me seems wrong. So anyhow, I appreciate any feedback or consideration on these things. And I would really love to know the code where the things are at, where RV is defined out that it is single. And hopefully we'll be able to move forward. But thank you for your time, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Ms. Nystrom. Again, very much appreciate the thoughtfulness that everybody is communicating and recognition about the challenges for the array of types of land. And I'm sure that, again, that Ms. Berg will be able to address some of that's related today, and she may be able to figure out something else to share in the future in an email to you. Okay, Mr. Keene. Mr. Keene, are you on with us?
Madam Chair, this is Angie Berg. I also did get an email over the weekend from Mr. Keene. In case he's not joining. I can certainly summarize that.
Okay. Do we have anybody else with us on the line at this point that you're aware of? No, okay.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, and I believe that all the other communications have been already shared with the board. Because this is new, would you please communicate with us what he was hoping to say today?
Mr. Keen is there.
Is he?
Yes, he's
Are you
waving.
there? Oh, there he is.
But I don't know if
Okay.
we can hear him.
Can you are on mute. I see you now. You are on mute. If you are able to unmute, we'd love up. Yep, you're unmuted now. Welcome. Although I cannot hear you still. Can you test your mic out? You might have to turn it up a little. Now you're on mute. Now you're off mute, but you might have to turn your mic up. You're back on mute. I have to admit, every now and then with these, I think my audio is connected and it isn't. Although if you've been hearing us, my guess, all right, why don't you try it now? I cannot hear you. Is anybody else able to hear? I don't think so.
He indicated he was going to call.
Which is great. Okay, well, and appreciate you doing that, Mr. Keen.
Madam Chair, as Mr. Keen calls in, I could also share another letter that came in after your packets went out.
That'd be great.
I do believe I sent it to you by email on Friday. It was from Deb and Greg Henry, and they have concerns about relaxing the current ordinance related to more RVs on a single parcel. They talk about how they're concerned with impacts of the septic, the lake, trash, and property values, and they can't see any reason for someone on the lake to be allowed to have 4 RVs on their property at the same time.
Hello?
And so, again, that is from Deb and Greg Henry. That was not included in your packet.
Okay.
Everything else was.
And, wonderful.
Hello?
And I think I can, Mr. Keen, Ms. Berg, are you okay if we switch over to him? All right, Mr.
Hello?
Keen, welcome.
Oh, thank you for your patience. My name is Tim Keen, and I have been on Rice Lake in Eden Valley for 26 years. And I am the Rice Lake Association president, although I'm speaking in my personal capacity. Over the last quarter century, we've witnessed a lot of changes on Rice Lake. And the ordinances proposed would result in greater intensification of both the shoreland and the lake use. And I'd just like to posit some questions as it relates to the use of the lake and the lake ecosystem. I was very sorry to hear that the earlier testimony suggests that this is an ordinance about class warfare, and it's really about the use of our resources. Rice Lake is a shallow lake. It averages over the 1,600 acres, about 12 feet in depth. The biggest bay is actually averages about 6 feet in depth. The lake is designated by the DNR as impaired waters. The Lake Association has been working vigorously over the last many years to control aquatic invasive species and maintain some integrity of the water quality. We have funded at our own expense inspections at the 2 DNR public accesses. We have undertaken treatment, especially of the starry stone, the dreaded starry stonewort. We do have two DNR public accesses, over 400 parcels. We have two resorts, Fishers, which accommodates approximately 25 RVs, and Morningstar, which has about 125 RVs and a 92 split marina. As we look at the lake, we understand that every system has a carrying capacity, and whether it's an ecosystem or a man-made system, if we're talking about the Sheriff's Department, Public Safety, they all have carrying capacities. At some point, the system can be overstressed from overuse. We did a boat traffic count last Labor Day weekend, one day, at Pelican Point on the east side of the lake. We had 310 watercraft going across Pelican Point. And I would add that Pelican Point used to be a rookery for 20 or more pairs of pelican. They are not there anymore. It got just too busy to serve as a pelican hatchery. The boats seem to get larger every year. A 100 horsepower motor will drive down a column of water more than 15 feet. Now, in a shallow lake, this is meaningful because that column of water will churn up sediment and phosphorus from the bottom, distribute throughout the lake, and result in the further degradation. So greater intensification of the use of the shoreland is going to reach a breaking point, and I think the commissioners, as trustees of our resources, need to take that into account. I think we really should be looking at our lakes with more granularity. Some lakes have a greater capacity to handle density than others. And each lake can handle so much. And then there is a gradual point of degradation where we lose the quality of our resource and we go into a regressive mode. I would only ask, still unaddressed in all of the discussions, is what becomes of the waste? The human waste, the garbage. There's no provision for moving a household into the shoreland area and what is going to become of the waste. Thank you very much for your comments, and I appreciate your service.
Thank you, Mr. Keene. Very much appreciate your thoughtful responses too, and for sticking with us. Appreciate your patience. And yes, we've been talking about the balance with property owners, and you're also bringing up certainly a point that it always makes this kind of thing a little challenging when lakes are so very different too. Thank you very much. I don't believe there's anybody else, Ms. Berg?
Not that I'm aware of, Madam Chair.
Okay. There was a few things raised before we go back to members. Is there anything that you think is important, additional information? And you gave us obviously a pretty comprehensive packet as well.
Madam Chair, it's up to you if you want me to respond to some of Mr. Rozicki's and Ms. Nystrom's comments or questions. I can certainly briefly do that, or do that separately in an email to you and to the testifiers.
Okay. Well, I think if there's something that's directly impacting this, it might be helpful, but I'm trying to see members to make sure that, and I saw that Commissioner Mergen was able to be back on in a little bit different way, maybe not. Members, how would you like to proceed? Angie, why don't you go ahead and, go ahead, I'm sorry, Steve?
I'd say if they're relevant, I think should
bring them up. Okay. So Angie, I agree. Let's go ahead. If you could go ahead and briefly do that. I know we got started late, but people were very patient too.
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the board. So based on Mr. Rizicki's comments, a couple of them I'll respond to. Vegetative and topographic alterations required for these temporary RVs, should this pass, would be looked at by staff when approving or considering a provisional use. So that is something that we would look at. As far as his comments on ordinance references, we will have a fact sheet that explains how this is going to work, and have diagrams such as this for people. I appreciate and understand that language like this is not really user friendly, so that's why our department does do fact sheets, notices on our website, etc. And secondly, related to his comment is we have addressed the issue of campgrounds that is in here. I'm going to pull it up. We do have language that he commented on needs to be changed, and so this would also be a part of the ordinance. As for the definitions, typically land use ordinances will not have regulation in the definition. A definition is explaining a word or a phrase, and so that's all it's doing. So the definitions don't need to be changed. This section of the ordinance does need to be changed, and we intend to do that should the ordinance change today or in the future. I believe that covered Mr. Zicky's comments, Ms. Nystrom's comments. So why wasn't she able to find anything in the DNR rules? So the DNR first promulgated rules in the 1970s. They changed them very infrequently. I think the last time was probably 15 or so years ago, and they ended up not being signed by Governor Plenty. So the DNR relies on local governments to enforce the rules and administer them according to the state rule on shoreline development, which is why the county is required to have DNR approve said changes. So the DNR does agree and support the concept that one RV is a residential dwelling unit, or it needs to be located in a campground. So we are consistent with interpreting, and along with the DNR, that is their understanding of how the intent of the shoreline work. I would add, and I commented on that earlier, is that the DNR does understand that the current rules don't allow for temporary RVs, and they have allowed or would allow in Stearns County and other counties to adopt rules to be less restrictive than what we currently have. Lastly, the issue of holidays, the number of days that are allowed which is 30 days per year, up to 30 days per year would be including holidays. So holidays would be included in the 30 days, but they are allowed to have the temporary RVs on a holiday weekends. I believe that captured my notes. Unless I'm missing anything, somebody would like a clarification on to do that.
Thank you. That was helpful. Members, questions? Concerns?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Just a couple of comments or questions. It's very appreciative, that there are so many people willing to comment. It helps us in a way, hopefully come up with good decisions. I just had a couple of, and listening to everybody, one thing that popped into my head, when Mr. Rizicki was commenting, there's reciprocal things that can happen too. If I would have RV on, let's say, my lot, and when you talk about noise complaints, with that also has to allow a reciprocal complaint situation to a person that just has a lake lot, maybe with an RV or something else on it. So I think we have to be careful when we make those type of comments, because I think that should be able to flow both ways. The other thing that Mr. Keene mentioned, was how many watercraft they counted. Now, to me, the number of units, I don't know how many are permanent, how many permanent residents have how many units on any lake in Stearns County or Minnesota or wherever. But to me, that should be a DNR issue to, have those restrictions out there. If I have a dock, can I have two wet jets on it, a pontoon, a fish boat, a ski boat? I think that's very important that he brings that up, but I think our Minnesota DNR needs to start maybe addressing some of those things, because that I don't think is an issue that we necessarily would be the regulatory oversight body for. So, I think some of that we have to, maybe they need to be lobbying, further up for those type of changes. And this is a tough one because, we camp a lot, and we were in Candy Ojai County this past weekend, and, I was driving my granddaughter around getting her to take a nap. And, I drove by a place that had a permanent resident, and he had 4 campers tucked around his yard. And I'm looking at what Candy Ojai's regulation is. I don't know. To me, sometimes we just all need to figure out how to get along without putting us in this little box all the time. We do need regulations and controls, but sometimes if we just could get along, we wouldn't have to build these little boxes, to keep everybody in line. That's just my comment.
That is so very true. Very true. Thank you. Other members, questions, concerns, ideas? Yes, Commissioner Persky.
Are we at the point do we want to open this up now for commissioner discussion, or
That's what I did. Oh, I forgot. Thank you. Okay, we have concluded the public hearing. The public hearing is closed. Thank you, Commissioner Persky. I moved on to our discussion without closing it. Go ahead.
I just want to pick up where Steve left off. It's unfortunate that we're sometimes having to be the parent here and having to make decisions about neighbors and how neighbors should get along and how they should treat each other. My first question would be, with what we're passing, I don't know, are we going to necessarily see an increase of use, which, would mean more stress on the water bodies, or will we just be legitimizing what's going on? And so that actually people would be able to work within the parameters of the ordinance, and not much would really change rather than encourage more change. And I'm not sure which direction we're going with that. But I do have a couple questions for staff, the way it's written, because I'm wondering about some of the one-size-fits-all things. So, Angie, with regards to the temporary, I understand the no hookup for the septic, and I do agree with that. But what about the water source? Can they hook up to the house water source or the resident water source? I thought I saw that they could not. Is that in the ordinance?
Ms. Berg.
Madam Chair, Angie Berg, I am having technical problems. I heard Ms. Berg. I'm going to have to let Shelley comment on that. I can see people, but I cannot hear anything.
Okay. We might need to get you in on the phone too. All right, Ms. Benson.
I believe the question was specifically related to hooking up to the water. And I believe you are allowed to make connection to the water or a water source. But it's a matter of the disposal of the septage once it's in the tank of an RV, then it would need to be properly disposed of.
And that would, Madam Chair, that would be my concern, is that they would be able to hook up to the water source, just for convenience of of bringing water to the site, and just some simple things of making drinks or ice or washing their hands, but of course the sewer remaining and then be disposed of properly. So I just wanted to make sure that they would be able to for convenience to do that if that was in there. The other question is I have on the temporary or provisional uses. You know, we have a lot of different odd shaped lots, and making a one size fits all. If we have a lot that's unbuildable for a structure because there's no room for which to put a structure and septics with the setbacks appropriately, allowing them to bring a RV into that and use that appropriately, would they be restricted then to 30 days or less than 30 days?
And Ms. Benson, go ahead and answer that. And then I think it's probably worth I really appreciated the charts we got, because while the lots are all different, we still see on there the setbacks as well as the difference it makes if you don't have a permanent dwelling on there. So Ms. Benson.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Persky, the requirement is that you'd still have to meet the setback standards based on the lake that you're on. But in some cases, the size of the lot wouldn't allow you to put a permanent structure on because it doesn't meet those standards. So you could use it then temporarily for those recreational purposes. So I think that's why we want to allow for some variation. And that's what essentially recreational lots are. You bring your camper on, you put it there for less than 30 days in the calendar year, and you use it recreationally. If you can't meet the provisions, you could certainly request a variance to allow for a pad, for example, to be placed in a location. And I've seen that in other jurisdictions where that's occurred when you don't have, can't meet all the setback standards. So I think there are some options that would be available to allow for a more permanent site to be created. Again, if it doesn't meet the setbacks, then variances would have to be requested.
Commissioner Persky?
Yeah, I just like to see us maybe have some flexibility to meet, some of those specific needs that are in irregular lots. And my questions with the setbacks, by all means, I would like them to meet the setbacks, but my concern would be that it's a lot that could possibly be used with a recreational vehicle, but it could not be used with a permanent structure. But then now we're limiting them to less than 30 days, where if they're having minimal impact, maybe they could enjoy a few more days than 30. So that would be my hope. Okay.
Ms. Benson?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Persky, I think I don't disagree that it would be nice to be able to take a look at which, when and where each circumstance would work. But since we don't work that way, we have to set a specific set of rules in place. I think it'd be important for us to try to have that conversation with Board of Adjustment members as they look at these kinds of things. For the most part, our Board of Adjustment has been very open to making those kinds of decisions when they see an opportunity to allow some usage that they didn't have before. We've certainly seen them make them or approve those requests. So I'm fairly confident that the Board of Adjustment would use their discretion and do something to help someone out in that case.
And I see Angie's back. Ms. Berg, did you have anything you wanted to add to that? And then we'll go to Commissioner Notch.
I'm going to pass on that, Chair Clark, because
you missed some of it. Okay. All right, Commissioner Notch.
Yeah, I tend to agree with Joe. And part of it is, to make someone have to go through the variance process, to pay the $500 and some to try and figure out how they can make it work. And I gotta believe these are hopefully very few sites probably throughout Stearns County that this would affect. But yeah, it just seems like an ideal place to maybe put a RV, which even a 40 footer, 10 by 40 is 400 square feet. You know, it seems such a small footprint, you know, and then have to pay the money to get the variance. But, you know, I guess if it's a way for them to be in compliance, you know, I guess that's probably what it would have to be.
I had a similar question and concern as well. I don't know. I was wondering if there is something that we could still do within this that permits such a pad, knowing that they're going to have to go through an application, or if that's just not something that, like, we need more information or what. But that the process and the cost, it does concern me, especially if we think it's likely that they would agree.
I'm sure if there was an easy way to address the situation, that would be great. Unfortunately, because every circumstance tends to be unique, and it's not always a road setback or a lake setback. Sometimes it's, you know, a combination of things. That's always the struggle that we have, is to try to come up with some general, what we would like to refer to as common sense. But common sense is not something that's easily written into an ordinance. While I can appreciate it, and that's the reason why we have a Board of Adjustment, they tend to be our common sense. So that's where we write the rules to try to accommodate the variation that's being asked for. As you'd heard in your testimony, you had some people in favor because it was trying to strike a balance, and you had some people who were against because it was giving more than they've had before. So that's why we have a Board of Adjustment. They allow for the variation to occur.
And might that then be something that, and I appreciate you reminding us all of that. And we know that you all have been trying to be thoughtful and creative and take into account these really incredible, many and sensitive aspects. Is this something that, should the Board of Adjustment start seeing a number of them, is that something then that could come back to us with perhaps needing to look at a different solution?
Madam Chair, that's exactly what would happen. For example, when we had feedlot situations occur repeatedly, we took a look at the standard and said, oh, that should be changed. If it's something that's happening on a repetitive basis and is being granted, then we look to make a change to the ordinance. So if that would be the case, we would look to make a change to the ordinance if we could come up with a codify.
Madam Chair.
Thank you. Yes, Ms. Berg.
I think I'm capturing the gist of the conversation. I would add to that and remind everybody that the DNR still does need to approve any change to the ordinance. And secondly, the DNR does receive public hearing notice of all variants in shoreland. So again, we're going to be somewhat bound by their recommendations on each variance request. And secondly, unlike feedlots, we can't just change something without the DNR's approval. So back to Ms. Nystrom's comments, you know, if the DNR squarely addressed this issue in rules as promulgated by the DNR and the legislature, that would be a different situation, in which case we would reevaluate. I wholeheartedly believe that we've pushed the DNR on this issue as much as we can at this time. But yes, perhaps after a year or so of various considerations and them seeing, commenting on them, that, as you know, the ordinance changes often. So it's never done. We can always reevaluate.
Appreciate that. Anybody else, or are you ready somebody ready to make a motion on this?
I would, this is Lee. There's one area we usually don't take into consideration on this. Yeah, we talk a lot about environmental impacts. We talk about regulatory impacts regarding other bodies. But we don't talk about the market impacts. They don't talk about the practical market reaction. Number one, you will not have in a project like this a total sellout. There will always be some orphan sites that just the market doesn't absorb. And what often happens, if you look at older projects, what happens that they tend to be consolidated into adjacent sites. Mike talked about a density of 400 and some units on this property. You get 400 units on this property, you're going to drive down market values. Is the owner or developer of that site going to actually happen? It isn't necessarily going to be the owner's decision. It's going to be the market's decision. So going for these remarkable density outlooks is unrealistic. So I realize that our land use professionals aren't trained in market analysis like, say, a Jeff Johnson would be or his staff. But the market will ultimately determine the density much more so than our regulation.
As usual, your comments and thoughts are appreciated. Is there a recommendation in there? Is there something different we should be considering in this, or where are you thinking we should be going now?
I think it might be appropriate to either affirm or deny an action here. Would you like a motion?
Yes.
I'd move to approve.
Okay. Commissioner Lensmeyer has moved to approve the department recommendation. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Notch. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I think we're ready for the roll.
Okay, District 1,
Aye.
District 2,
Aye.
District 3,
Aye.
District 4,
Aye.
District 5.
Aye.
Passes unanimously.
Great, thank you. Okay, members, we're a little bit off on time, as you know, but that was a really good discussion. And Lee, I'm looking at you right now thinking about hopefully we've made some progress, and you know, we know this isn't perfect, but we'll get a chance to see how it plays out in many ways. We are scheduled for a break. We are going to take a brief break and we'll be back hopefully like in 5 minutes. All right, welcome back. Members, our next item of business is from Environmental Services. This is are coming back with some questions, and some things have been addressed with regard to us considering the conditional use permit application. I believe we've got Mr. Cashtier as well as Mr. Carlson. If there's further questions, we're going to have Angie talk about it. Just want to remind us that, as Lee often reminds us, is that when something comes to us, it's us with fresh eyes. It is separate from what might have happened before. This particular item is building off of our comprehensive plan and the comprehensive plan update, which permits a variety of uses in agricultural areas. It is not something more than that. Hopefully we'll get a chance to really just focus on this particular request. And then at a later date, we certainly can address more items. This certainly is something that at the moment we obviously all know that we have some unfortunate conflict, perhaps with at least some, or with results on the Planning Commission that are different than what the board has decided. And that's unfortunate, because once we reach a decision, we're all supposed to be following those. But for today, the question is this particular project meet under our requirements? And then we can decide what we're going to go ahead and do with it. So at least for right now, Ms. Berg, I'm going to turn it back over to you. We had some questions last time.
Thank you, Commissioner Clark. Yes, this is to reconsider the conditional use permit request from IPS Solar on behalf of Brian and Carolyn Cash. And this is for a 1 megawatt solar farm located in Painesville Township. As you indicated, Madam Chair, there's really 3 things that the board needs to do today, and we're not going to have you go through the findings of fact worksheet, but what those really are is this request consistent with the comprehensive plan? Is it compatible with the existing neighborhood? And finally, and these are all from state statute for how you make decisions on conditional use permits, has the applicant and the property owner demonstrated that they have met the standards contained in the ordinance? So just keep those 3 things in mind. And the public hearing is closed. However, the applicant and property owner are with us today. Previous action was at your last meeting, continued the item for the applicant to address several items. And I would suggest that the board hear from them.
All right, we will do so. Welcome back to both of you.
Thank you.
Who's going to speak first?
Well, I guess I'll start again. Evan
Carlson. Mr. Carlson, thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, Evan Carlson with IPS, and I presented last time. It's the same project. I wrote up a letter addressing the issues that were raised, and also providing some supplemental materials that I thought could be useful for this decision, and just knowledge about the solar industry. The first thing I corrected was some typos, and I provided 2 copies of the site plan showing those corrections. There's a red line copy, which actually shows where the changes are made, and then a clean copy with those changes accepted and incorporated into the document. The second issue was specifying the days for construction as being Monday through Friday. I did make that change also, and that is incorporated in the same documents. There was some question about the use of the word intent in the decommissioning plan and whether or not it's subjective language. We changed that language, and now it has a more clear statement. And then there was an issue of the haul away distance for recycling facilities. I addressed that in detail, discussing just the efforts that are being made to create these recycling facilities. I altered the decommissioning plan to have a 200-mile haul away distance. However, I do believe that there will be a closer distance at the time for decommissioning this project. Also, there was a question about the use of the word reasonable in the decommissioning plan. I addressed that. And finally, an agreement between the property owner and us addressing decommissioning. In that case, I provided the section of our lease which has a section on, we have contractual obligations to the landowner to remove the facility. So I provided that section of the lease agreement as well. I went on to address some other issues, on property values, benefits of the seed mix, how the seed criteria is selected, and the benefits of that seed mix on water and wetlands, and then just these similar programs that the state has for creating a similar vegetative base that would be found under the array. I think that seed mix is very important, and I go into the benefits of it in a lot of detail. I go into all of the subjects in detail in the supplemental materials. So my intent is for the write-up to really address things, and then I provided a lot of other documents really as citations. They might be helpful for you, but I don't mean to bombard with a ton of information, but I wanted to support the points I'm making with something. So that's why I had all those attachments too. So, we can go through the narrative, and in it, I hope I addressed the concerns. I did my best to target them in a really straightforward way. And I'm here to listen if there are any lingering concerns.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And this is a group that takes supplementary material seriously. So hopefully everybody got a chance to read that. And I believe, and I am so sorry, I want to make sure I'm pronouncing your last name right. Is it Cash, or is it A or A? Ryan.
Cash.
Cash, thank you. I want to make sure I'm saying it right. When you have a first name like Terrell, it's always important to check those things out. We appreciate your patience with us and for coming back. Is there anything you want to make sure that we are hearing right now?
Nope, I think Evan is handling it.
Okay, thank you. And members, I think I guess before we open it up to more questions and comments, and I think Commissioner Knotts, you'd been asking had some questions before for Ms. Berg. So I'm not sure where you're at, but we just tackled a pretty ticklish, very complex balancing of property interests. And this is also a property owner interest balancing. Well, not so much balancing, but it is a property owner issue. So, Steve, did you have some things that you thought would be helpful for us? Or did you get your questions answered?
Yeah, I get, I guess for the most part, I did drive through this area over the weekend, and I get, some of the comments where there are so many in this area, but I think by now we understand that XL Energy has substation capacity here. I guess one comment I want to make, some individuals stated, we're losing so much farmland. I kind of just was doing a back of the envelope calculation. If we took the 40 or so that we have, plus let's just say they're all 10 acres, plus the two larger ones, let's say they're 100 acres, that's 600 acres. Stearns County has roughly 450,000, crop acres. We're less than 0.2%, and that's if they're all prime farmland, which we know they're not. I guess I don't have any other specific questions for staff or anyone in regards to this, unless somebody else does. I will make one comment, which maybe Evan can, concur with or not. right now there's a lot of transmission congestion, which from my understanding, transmission was built originally probably for a large base load source, and then your distribution entities, would get that power and through their substations disperse it. Whereas now when you have a lot of different sources, it's kind of like a road or a freeway with a lot of on-ramps. And I think, one of the problems we're probably seeing nationwide is this transmission congestion, because now you have all these on-ramps of power versus a large power source, moving the majority to a place to disperse it. Now that's just my uneducated view of how it works, and I'm not sure if that's how it actually plays out.
That may be accurate for utility scale projects, but it's important to understand the distinction between the distribution network and the transmission network. The transmission network goes from a power plant to a substation where voltage is stepped down, and from that point it enters the transmission network, which goes to consumers' power demand sources. We are a community solar garden. We're not in the business of selling power to Excel in that sense. When we put power into the grid, we get a bill credit for that power, and we sell that bill credit to another Excel customer somewhere else in the grid. So we're really, the program is all about being fair to people who don't have a good spot for solar panels. That's what community solar is all about. And because of that, we're in that distribution level of the grid, which operates differently. It's regulated by Excel, and it's owned by Excel, whereas the transmission network is regulated by MISO. It's a federal group, and I understand that there's a lot of congestion on it as well. But I'm by no means an expert in that. We're in the transmission level, so I hope that answers your question. Yeah.
Other questions for either Mr. Cash, the property owner, or for Mr. Carlson?
Explain again why that substation is there. What's the purpose of that? That isn't that old. What's the impact there?
Thank you, Commissioner Lensmeyer. Mr. Carlson?
Yeah, I'll do my best to explain it, although I'm not an engineer, but my understanding is that basically that's where the high voltage transmission lines are stepped down to lower voltage, and that's the point in which it enters into the distribution network.
Where's the entry point, so to speak, of the electricity generated by the panels you're installing?
So, yeah, that's directly to the east. So we don't plug in at the substation location. We plug in at the nearest three-phase location. And, I answered some questions to the Planning Commission about where this power actually, flows. And that main feeder actually, it does go to the east, but it also goes southwest. So that power would follow the path of least resistance. Wherever it's needed, it will go. So say, for example, one day there's a larger demand in one area versus another, then that's where it would flow. Also, the capacity of the substation for the power is only one factor in whether or not the power can be put in there. It's also the demand on the line. It may be that the power gets consumed before it ever hits the substation. So, it is complicated. I've described it as like a sprinkler system, and we're putting water into the sprinkler system at one point. But, it's obviously more complicated than that, and Excel has a bunch of engineers who specialize in it.
Commissioner Lensmeyer? Anything else on that? Oops, you're on mute. There you go. Go ahead.
In terms of the distribution across the county, most of these panel farms, or whatever the proper terminology is. Most of these are in the west end of the county. I think there's only, what, 2 or 3 outside of District 5. Does anybody know that?
Angie, is that something you or Shelley have? I don't know where the map is right now.
Madam Chair, just to confirm Commissioner Lenzmeyer question, is the question where other than District 5 are the solar farms?
I think you're muted, Lee.
I think the ones I think I've seen go through, I think they were in District 3, Jeff's district, but there aren't very many of them there. I think the vast majority are in the west end of the county. And this is a technical area. I wonder why Stearns County has more of these things than anyone else. We thought we'd slow things down by raising the amount of the guarantee on this. But really what that does, if you raise that too high, you ultimately invite litigation to get out of payment. I just don't, granted, it's a technical field, but I'm not wrapping my head around the technical.
Sure. Well, and I think too, if we think about it, where Excel is located in the district, in the county. And I think the other thing that's been a little interesting, and Lee, I thought the reason why we raised those was to make sure there was enough surety in case it was needed, in a couple decades from now. But part of this has gotten perhaps accelerated because we are needing base load and we are losing other power sources. And so there has been interest both in that as well as on the property owner side. Property owners seeing this as an option for them. And let's face it, we've talked about this before, with Congress and the state bipartisanly saying this is something they want to see as some other power sources go away. It's out there. What makes this a little bit different, solar gardens are a little different, is they don't fit quite into the same thing as the big mega sites, which we don't have in front of us. So yeah, it's complicated. And I've actually been in my head, it's like, okay, this is energy. This is essentially utility moving forward. Is that something else that in the midst of all of this, either we or the state needs to be contemplating? Ms. Berg, was there something else you wanted to add on that?
No, Madam
Chair.
Any specific question?
Yes, Commissioner Persky. I think I see you. There you are. Hi, Joe.
Yeah, hi. Just a comment to Lee. Lee, I have a couple in my district as well. We have up on the Wooderman property on River Road going north by Frederick's Garage. Also, there's one out by the Sartell High School, and then also out in St. Joe, out by Milk and Honey on the west side of St. Joe. So there's a few that are in my district as well.
I'm glad you brought that up too. I was going to. And then I think in our more, urban locations, the areas that we might not have come in, we aren't yet really seeing whatever the next version of what might look like a solar garden there. Instead, what we're seeing is solar on buildings or put in as parts of schools or some of those other kinds of efforts as energy efficiency. But they're not the same thing, obviously.
My paranoia turns on ultimate disposal. And I guess that comes down to a chicken and the egg type factor. You don't have a disposal location until you need one, but where these would ultimately place, it's going to wind up in front of a body, either like ours or Stearns County itself. So we are creating in the long term a issue for future board. Maybe I'll be dead by then. There's always,
You know, Lee, I've been wondering, Angie actually brought this up last time, and I know it's not fully on point for this particular one in front of us, but the idea that some counties have done where they're making that contract, so that part of it solely between the other entities and taking the county out of it might be something we want to consider. I've also been thinking a lot about, we don't, you know, we know that people on certain farms, and Steve could speak to this more than the rest of us, have very large equipment that comes and goes that we have no control over. People are putting up, whether it's silos and how are they going to decommission it. Heaven forbid, the power sources in Monticello and Becker, those are going to be huge ones. When we get new furnaces, we've got it. So yeah, I mean, are we going to have the world's biggest equivalent of a car dump site? Hopefully not. That is something that happens all the time, and that we at least are not, dare I say, putting our requirements more on than we have already. Steve, you probably know something more than either Lee or I on this.
We still, Stearns County's in a position where they have more of these than anybody else.
Well,
And,
staff has brought us back something about that, Lee. Wait a second. Steve was trying to talk, but I think he was muted.
Yeah, I just unmuted. Going off of what Lee said, you know, you could kind of have that paranoia, but then should we have had that paranoia when the county put them on the West Service Center or any other private business owners? You know, because there's the same concern. So I'm not sure, you know, in my opinion anyway, that paranoia should rise to such a level, because I think, you know, European countries and other places have had them a lot longer than we have. And, you know, we don't really see that paranoia anywhere. It'd be nice if they were all made here, but they're not, so.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a small company up north that started making them. It would be very nice. And that is the reason why we were trying to make sure that there would be the resources so that both the county isn't footing the bill in decades from now, or that that there is thoughtful progression on this.
like any real estate development, the folks behind the projects want approvals yesterday, but ultimately the public body assumes the responsibility for the long-term impact. Call it prejudice or paranoia, whatever you want, but I'm going to vote against approval.
So again, I think one of the things, and you are certainly welcome to do that, we have to at least go back to look at what our plan says, what the conditions of this property are, and whether or not it fits into them. I mean, that's what we need to take a look at. And I will say I have voted for several things that I personally disagree with, because we do not have state laws that actually are helpful on it. We instead are looking at the property owner's rights and what they are able to do with their property. And I would hope that as a group that often is talking about that a lot, that is something that we take into consideration as we're moving forward. Now I'm just speaking as me, not as anything else.
This is Jeff Bergen. I'd like to change the narrative maybe a little bit here. I'm looking at page 432 of our packet, and I want to make sure I'm interpreting this correctly. It says the LISA score for the area that the solar garden is to be put in is 63.85. I have that correct?
Madam Chair, let me get to the page. My packet page.
432.
And we should also remember, she's finding that right now this is in CRP. It's not being actually planted.
Okay. And then it goes on further down, but the total property is 159 acres and the Lisa score is 53.98. So is this being put on some of the better land in that property?
Mr. Cash, I know you're here. Can you respond to that? My recollection is that primarily you all are doing livestock and that, if I recall correctly, you're leasing to your brother and this part of the land is not being currently farmed, but I'm afraid my recollection might be incorrect. So Commissioner Morgan, you've got a really good and important question. Although I'm looking at Commissioner Notch right now, and I know he'd say that the Lisa score doesn't have much to do with this because they can be removed and be put back into being used for property, for farming. So I'm learning something. Mr. Cash, are you on still?
Yes, I'm still here.
Thank you.
So that is incorrect. We are currently farming the entire, basically the farmable land, and this is some of the better stuff. But our goal was just to make sure that we maintain enough to continue to raise cattle. So me and my brother are in the farm together.
That was the part I was trying to remember. Okay, thank you. Go ahead, keep going.
And we're 50-50 on everything. So all these decisions are being made jointly.
So can you talk a bit more about it then? So what are you needing in terms of, and again, we don't want to get into micromanaging your business or your property, although it might sound like that right now. We're not actually trying to do that. We're just wrestling with some complicated kinds of things. So if you don't mind reminding us, refreshing our memories about what you're hoping to do here, what you're needing from the land.
Yes, we're looking to still maintain 35 acres for crops, and that should be sufficient to raise the cattle that we currently have. And then, like I said, our plan is to continue in the future with the same thing. So this is a little bit on the better side, but then we also kind of had plans. So the next two sections north of that, as you can see the yellow there, that is by far the worst on the property. That's, if it's a dry year, crop is pretty much dead. So that's kind of what the intent was to get these 2 or 3 in, and then kind of go from there. But we will always maintain the land to the south as crop, kind of right around south of that red box.
Okay, so I think Angie's trying to show us, so members, if you can see that, south of the red box is where you would be continuing. Is it also west of that, or is it specifically south? Just again, for our understanding.
Yeah, so it's kind of the light tan, the darker brown, and then you cross County Road 130. You get the darker brown there, and then that other darker brown section there. That's all coming to about 35 acres. We have 95 total tillable acres. And then I think you've kind of stated it before. Yes, we're looking for better ways to, maximize our income off of the farmland. And, a good year for us is 180 bushels. Typical years we're down in the 130 to 150 range. I mean, just depending on how much rain we get, it's, kind of that Lisa score being the 60s, it is on the lower side. And as far as productivity goes, I would agree with that score. It's on the lower side. Thank you.
Commissioner Morgan, did you have another question for Mr. Cash?
Kind of thinking off on a little parallel subject with Lee's comments here with paranoia. I'm kind of paranoid just with this company, with the IPS Solar. What they originally presented to the Planning Commission with those major errors in there, what if that had just totally gone through? And now down the road, you got the wrong county in there, and you got the wrong, instead of county, it says city. What if that had all gone through? And and then they didn't even correct it before it came to us. So that's pretty sloppy to me. I'm sure the company wants to call themselves professional, but this company in particular gives.
Ms. Berg, can you tell us what would happen if, and it was important that we caught those, and that was a, oops, dear. Hopefully you didn't disappear on us, Commissioner Mergen. You were making some important points. Ms. Berg, can you tell us process-wise what happens if something that gets submitted originally has those kinds of typos or mistakes in it?
Yes, Madam Chair, as it relates to some of the items that were pointed out in terms of the decommissioning, financial guarantee, those are all separate documents that we review before the solar farm is given a permit to build. And that letter of credit or cash,
Paranoia.
it's cash. If it's a letter of credit, we make sure that the proper county is represented. This isn't it's a permit. And so, yes, there were errors in the application. However, again, it's not bound by some of those words in the permit itself. We're bound by the conditions that the board, if approved today, would place, not bound by prior applications.
Could I comment on this?
Yes.
To begin with, our company has been around for about 30 years, and we're not a big company. And I am one of the handful of people who work at this company. We're real people. We're real Minnesotans. And when people say that we are not trustworthy, I take that personally. And we have an excellent reputation of developing within this state and in other states. And if you talk with our landowners, you would understand that. We've done a lot of projects in this county. I think there are a few typos, and I regret that, but people make mistakes. And we've done our best to rectify that. I have spent a lot of time adding supplemental materials and explaining those mistakes. But I want to clarify something here. You're talking about IPS, you're talking about me, and I take my integrity very seriously. I take the integrity of my colleagues very seriously, and I take it personally when somebody questions my integrity and the integrity of my employer. So, if you have something beyond a typo, a human mistake, I'd like to hear it. But we have worked very hard to have a good reputation in this community, and I think we have that. We've worked hard with partners like Milk and Honey when we developed those projects to make sure they were able to develop their project, to subdivide off that land from our lease, to work with landowners to make sure they're happy with these projects long term, even though they are sold. We go above and beyond to make sure that they're happy long term with these projects. And our landowners are happy with our projects. And if you'd like references, I can do them. And by and large, most counties are happy with our projects before this particular one. So, I can't let that go unaddressed. We're not some faceless corporation. These are real people.
And Mr. Carlson, I totally understand and appreciate your wanting to respond to that. And Commissioner Morgan, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think part of the challenge sometimes was when something gets to us and there aren't mistakes, and it's complicated anyways, it can provide a bit of doubt. And so I'm sure you're going to take even additional precautions in the future to make sure that all of those are looked at before they get to us, because honestly, the less we have to worry about that, the more confidence we can have moving forward. And I know you've worked hard to try to have that confidence. And, again, this can get complicated. So I don't think Commissioner Morgan was trying to impugn your integrity, but he was trying to say it gives me cause or pause on confidence.
Madam Chair, Shelley Benson.
Yes. Thank you, Ms. Benson.
If you feel that your question was answered related to Lisa, we can let that go. But one of the main factors in the Lisa score when I'm looking at this is the site assessment factors. There's a larger site assessment factor on the 31, which is the things outside of the land. The land is pretty much the same, and staff did let me know that the reason that the site was lowered a little bit on the land score, which was 34.8 on the larger piece, was because of the amount of wetland that was taken into consideration on the larger piece. And when you do a smaller piece, you're only looking at that smaller area. So the land on the small piece was 32.6. The land on the larger piece was 34.8. So if you're looking, it actually has a lesser score on the smaller piece of land, but the site factors, the things that are closer to other properties and other factors that come into play, which are typically the social factors, the SA factors, were lesser on the larger site and greater on the smaller. So that's why it was kind of a strange balancing situation. In that particular case, the numbers aren't too far off, but I think it's more of the site assessment factors that are really causing the main shift in the scores.
Thank you. That gets to be a little complicated itself.
Yes.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Notch, and then you, Commissioner Persky.
Oh, Joe can go ahead.
All right, go ahead, Joe.
Okay. I guess I'll just weigh in. I guess I'm having a little bit trouble of where we're going through with this process. And this is not the first time we've struggled with a solar garden. I mean, we all have a good number of questions that relate to different topics. And we didn't bring up the one we have concerning the taxation thing, but that's another topic in and of itself.
Right, and Joe, I'm stopping you just for a second. We've gotten, once again, all off on lots of things. It's really only about this proposal in front of us. So go ahead.
And that's correct. And we just continue to move one proposal after another. The one north of town on the Utterman, the Uttermans actually wanted to have, they had one solar garden in one corner and then wanted to place the other one in the other because that was a less productive area. And they were told that, well, it's more economical to abut them because leaving space between them isn't the best way to go, and it's not cost effective. Well, here we're not butting them together. We're separating them without any concern for cost. So it doesn't seem that that was a valid argument then back when the Uttermans wanted to go about doing what they were going to be doing. And the whole idea of the community solar, this idea of limiting, again, back to 1 meg and continually stacking them on top of each other, I think we need to maybe legitimize what we're doing with these community solar gardens and how we're best using the property. And the Planning Commission, has struggled with this as well. And I think we're at a place that maybe we need more discussion about where we're going before we move ahead.
And hopefully the state is going to choose to address some of the hodgepodge that they have put together. Commissioner Notch.
Well, just kind of tagging along with what Joe said, where, one company says it's not viable to put them next to each other and the next one does. Maybe part of that could also be, in this case, maybe it's the landowner's, option to do it this way versus the solar developer wanting to do it this way, but I guess that's their private business from that standpoint. I guess at this point, I would move approval of the CUP request.
My guess is Commissioner Lenzmeyer would say the horse is probably dead. I'll go ahead and second that. And I'm going to second it in part. I'm not saying that there isn't more work to do more broadly in all of this. But based on what's in front of us, our comprehensive plan, what we determined with our ordinance and everything else, I think this is an appropriate use. And if in voting no, if this doesn't pass, I guess then the question really is why we're saying no. Because we do not have something, we already have taken some precautions to be dealing with things like disposal, among other things. Further discussion, or are you ready to vote?
Do we have a second?
Yep, I seconded. As often you all like to talk about is, I think, Steve's pretty close to what's going on within the whole western half of the county. And while I think it's important we're looking at the whole county, I think that takes something into account as well as frankly, the landowner. Yes.
I just want to make one comment. Albeit, I maybe know a little bit more on some of the issues, because of the position with Stearns Electric. I mean, by no means do I, have a handle on whether solar is right, wind's right, or what is right. I think nationwide there's concerns on the whole system, of what's going to take place. But, again, I would have to say, my rationale is going off of what the comp plan states and what we've set up is basically my rationale for voting to approve.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And certainly part of what we're grappling with is that broader array as companies in the nation, or even what happened in Texas with their outages, and what do we have as backup supply. It's kind of a weird place to be in the middle of as a county board. Okay. Lee, I'm sorry, you're muted. Commissioner Lensmeyer, you're muted. Unfortunately, you're still muted.
Yeah.
There you are. Now you're fine.
No, I showed up. Call a vote. I mean,
all right.
And that
I would agree with that.
The result of the vote will determine our next step.
All right. Let's take the roll.
Okay, District 2.
No.
District 3.
Dave.
District 4.
No.
District 5.
Aye.
District 1.
Aye.
Motion fails 3-2.
Okay, members. So, Ms. Benson.
Madam Chair, are you looking for something from us to bring back at this point, or how would you like us to proceed?
Madam, I think you're hearing concerns about additional solar, and maybe this is reflecting that we need to take a bit of time to look at where we're currently, let our current ordinance work its way through.
Madam Chair, if
we
need additional review, I suggest that because we have brought back all of the options we think are available. We are on the state, we listen to the state standards, we talk to them, we review everything. I don't think we have the capacity to take this on. So we would be looking to hire a consultant to come in to assess the issue and to have a larger conversation if that's the wish of the board. We can't take on taxation. That's a state level issue. We can't take on the capacity of 1 megawatt. That is also a state issue. It's not something we have the ability to address. So if there is some specific issue that you are aware of that you think we should be studying, we certainly could do that. But I believe at this point we would need a consultant to help us with that.
Dr. Williams, do you have any thoughts or guidance?
Madam Chair, not really any more than what I think I just heard from Shelley. I'm, you know, the board's been through and through this recently. Where we would take it, I'm not really sure.
Madam Chair, Angie Berg.
Ms. Berg.
Point of clarification, it's a lot cleaner if the board would follow up with a denial vote for cash. I understand that might not be Robert's Rules of Orders, but I think it's cleaner if the board would make a denial decision.
I think a challenge with part of that might be the conflict within some of the findings. I mean, and I do have personally some concerns about us having findings that are in conflict, which is what came to us. So I think we could do a denial, and it may be that we are just not ready at this point to be adding, as a board, to be adding additional units, solar farms over one on a property. And maybe it's really taking a pause. So I'm not sure exactly what you're thinking with that, Angie. I mean, if that's what we're needing, we can do that.
So the option would be to deny as recommended by the Planning Commission, and then you will be adopting these findings as proposed by the Planning Commission.
I think what you're hearing me say is that's not why we would be denying, though. We're denying based on something different than that. The landowner and the ISP came back with some of addressing a number of those, but we're at a different point. So I might not have understood you correctly.
No, my second option was going to be that, again, the board, and I know you've had a long meeting on this, but to dialogue on, is it consistent with the comprehensive plan? Is it compatible with the existing neighborhood? And why did the landowner and property owner not demonstrate they met the requirements? Those are the reasons by state statute the board would need to deny a conditional use permit.
So,
yes, Mike.
What? And Angie, what I hear you saying is that those board members that have voted no should be verbalizing why, or create findings of fact for them to consider.
Well, and I think one of the things where it's a little tricky for us right now is, and again, members speak up, is some of what I'm hearing concern about what may or may not happen with some things that are beyond our control, as well as perhaps a lack of confidence for right now, that's different than the questions that you just raised. And that's why I'm wondering, and what's hard, I'm not sure procedurally we have this in front of us, is that while we have a recent ordinance supporting one, we don't have something that's broader. And in this case, it seems like we, at least for the moment, until some broader questions are raised or the state adopts things, that at least maybe we should be temporarily taking a pause and citing more than one. And especially since this property owner is talking about conditions that we generally would consider to be appropriate under the comprehensive plan in our past practice. So I don't know, Mike, but it's a different reason. And that's okay. I mean, it can be a different reason. I get that it's hard because it's on this specific property.
In terms of related.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, Lee, I couldn't hear you before. Go ahead, Commissioner Lensmeyer. Oh,
You're
now
still
you're
muted.
muted again. There you go. Oh, you're muted.
Okay, there we go. This is just backwards from what, okay, anyway. The point that I want to make is that what's the limit, what would be the limitation on these folks reapplying? What's the time frame typically they'd have to wait? And if they would reapply, would they have to pay the application fee?
Okay, those are both good questions, Commissioner Lenzmeyer. Ms. Berg.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Lenzmeyer, the reapplication process is 1 year unless something changes. So, for example, if this proposed solar farm would be moved to a different location on the property, that would be considered a change. And secondly, the fee would apply, correct? It's per application.
All right. All right. And there's nothing to prevent the applicant from requesting the board to waive the fee, correct?
Ms. Berg.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Lenzmeyer, correct. That's typically the process. Would be
Yeah, we've done that before. Okay. Yeah, I'm disappointed in me because I'm not asking very enlightened questions, but I don't know what I don't know. How's that?
Well, Madam Chair, I mean, you have two issues. You have one, you have this request before you, but then I don't think staff has a good feeling for where you want to go after this in general with our ordinance.
Or at least with the adding of the potential of adding additional ones at this time.
Right.
We did recently pass an ordinance. Commissioner Lenzmeyer, is there something else that you'd want to see them doing? Maybe that helps us get into the findings of fact.
Well, there was progress in one respect. I always thought that looking at that and seeing that substation, that was an input, but it sounds to me these folks clarified that that's not the purpose of that substation. So this is just going to take more understanding by us, a group of people that just aren't in to this biz. I mean, we can understand subdivision plat, densities, environmental concerns, etc. But this is going to take some thought on our part just to develop a comfort level. And no, I don't know what that would take right now.
Madam Chair, if I may, Angie Berg, we could take this one issue at a time. I think that would be my recommendation, and that would be to have some dialogue, albeit generalized, to these top 3 or 4 questions on the findings of fact. It's the same questions the planning commission is required to go through. And if you're not looking at adopting their findings, if you could have some dialogue on that, we could come back to the board at your next meeting with proposed findings. But at this point, I would need something to base those questions or those findings off of.
Yeah, we're
Lee,
back.
do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I don't know what I don't know.
Okay.
I'm sorry to.
No, that's fair. What I'm hearing you say is I'm wrestling with this, and it's almost like ultimately there's a no vote. I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth because there's still a lot you're not sure about. And it may or may not have much to do with this proposal. It has more broadly to do with, and maybe it is this proposal. So can you say more about that? Again, because we've got to put something in writing. Yeah, okay.
So Carol, maybe this needs to come back at the next meeting and have a broader discussion.
I think so. I think we're not quite ready for that right now. So why don't we do that so that we can be thoughtful about that? I think that's a good idea. And it's not because we're trying to prolong. I mean, part of what's gotten hard about this is we're having, it's almost like we're churning. And so, but I think, Lee, what you're saying about not not knowing what we don't know or what you don't know, that makes some sense too. I mean, there may be things I know that you don't know, and I'm not doing a very good job articulating that, or somebody else has information. But I think that that's fair. Mike, can we put this on our next meeting?
Commissioner Notch has been raising his
Oh,
hand.
I'm sorry. I'm trying to find everybody. It's very hard when we've got the, can we go back to seeing everybody at once? Can we take this down for a moment? So we can do
Well,
the
I
calendar
just
review. Go ahead, Steve.
I just have a comment that maybe would help in the near future. I did talk to one of the developers who would be willing to come and kind of give an explanation of how their projects work and just a Q&A. We had them come into the Stearns Electric Board meeting and do a presentation. And I did talk to them, and they would be willing to, come to a county board meeting and do a presentation as well if we would be open to doing something like that. They did a half hour for us, so that's what we want.
Lee? Yeah, you're on mute. I'm sorry, can you, okay. Oh, you're still on mute. There you go.
Okay, it will be a bit in the future, looking at our July schedule.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Ms. Berg.
A decision needs to be made on this by at your next meeting to comply with the 60-day rule. So my recommendation would be for a no vote today, or call the question on a no vote and direct staff to bring back discussion at your June 22nd meeting. And we would basically be asking the commissioners to complete those 4 questions on the findings of fact worksheet. That's going to become your reasons for denial. Does that make sense?
Okay. Joe, did you have something you wanted to throw in? And it does sound like having him come would be helpful. There's some questions that we all have that would be hard to answer otherwise. Joe.
Yeah, I find it interesting that we struggle with the no vote because we don't have the answers to the questions, but we don't have the answers to the questions, but we'll go ahead and make a yes vote. And so I find it interesting that we struggle on the no side, but we don't struggle on the yes side, but the yes side has a greater impact.
Well, and it may be that the questions became more to the forefront for some, or frankly, there's a lot of other stuff swirling around that we don't control that sometimes hits us sideways.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think we are all respectfully trying to not get caught up in those sideways swirls, even though it can be hard. So if that makes any sense. And I know you said you'd feel more comfortable if we did the vote the other way. Do we need to?
Madam Chair, that's everything I've been taught in 22 years of attending training.
Okay. And somebody should be making a motion. And I don't think it's going to be Steve or I. I could be wrong.
Angie, I'll clear that up for us then. I'll go ahead. I'll make the motion to deny the request.
Okay, there's a motion.
I'll second, Mergen.
Okay. There's a motion and a second. My guess is we do not need any other discussion on this at this point, but we will be coming back at our next board meeting. Randy, would you mind taking the roll one more time?
District 3.
Aye.
District 4. District 4, Lee.
Aye.
District 5. Nay. District 1.
Nay.
And District 2. District 2, Joe?
Aye.
Okay. That passes 3-2.
Okay, Mr. Cash and Mr. Carlson, I'm sure you're disappointed. As Commissioner Lensmeyer said, this doesn't necessarily mean it's fully the end of the road. I think there's some additional things it sounds like maybe needing to be sorted out, and it may be a timing issue or it may not be. All right, members, we have one more item on our agenda, and hopefully we can do it rather quickly given the time. We have issues by commissioner. District, who did we just leave off of? We did 3. How about District 4? Lee?
Nothing.
Okay, District 5, Steve?
Just a reminder, breakfast on the farm is Saturday.
Yeah.
I think it's like 7:30 to 1 o'clock, I think it is. And you got to meet at the Melrose public schools parking lot. It's a drive-through event this year, so you'll be driving through some breakfast on your way out.
Great, thank you.
That's all I have.
Thank you. District 2, Joe.
Madam Chair, I don't have anything.
Okay, thank you.
Enjoy the good weather.
You mean about to get hot weather? Okay, not Arizona hot weather, but hot for us. Okay, Commissioner Mergen, we're so glad that you were able to get back on.
Yes. I would like to, I brought this up before, I'd like to revisit the 1 megawatt approval for in the future by administration. I, for one, would like to reconsider my vote on that. So
Well,
I'd
and
like
we
to
just
rethink that at some point in the future too.
That might be some point in the future, but given we just put that in place, we likely need to take some time to be looking at that before we take another look. We usually do that with our ordinances. So I appreciate that, but okay, District 1 here. There are, for those of you, I'm sure you saw, there is, NACO is going to be having its conference coming up, and Mike's been working out when we can alternately meet. I know there's at least another person or two who are considering participating either hybrid or in person. For those who are considering in person, I've been told that NACO will be the only people in the building, and they're going to try to make it as safe as possible. And so that may be something that you decide you want to be considering, but please make sure you're looking at that in the relatively near future. I think they thought that most people were going to be participating remotely, and now it looks like most people will be participating in person. Mike, was there anything then about our July schedule?
No, as you can see, it's been altered, and we're assuming that that first meeting in July, which is a ways from now, that we will meet in person.
Yeah, which will be great. And appreciate that. And it's too bad NACO changed their dates because our calendar reflected the original NACO dates. All right, members, I hope you have a great rest of the day. Hope people get to go out and do breakfast on the farm. And with that, we are adjourned.